I would say I'm about 30% serious about what I'm saying. I'm about 30% serious that would be a possibility for me. I'm Leilani.
And I'm Cassie.
And we're just two middle-aged fangirls who love geeking out about our favorite things.
K-pop and K-pop adjacent entertainment.
Join us monthly for discussions, activities, and games.
We're rating this show PG-13-ish.
It's usually pretty innocent, but you may occasionally hear some foul language and mature topics discussed.
If this all sounds good to you, then grab your light stick and come along with us, because we're K-popping around town.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for coming back, or if you're a first-time listener, thank you for listening.
Welcome to K-popping around town. We are so excited for today's episode.
We are very excited. It's something we've talked about on and off for a couple of years. So let's get into it.
Should we do the shout outs first?
Yes, please do.
So we wanted to shout out our Spotify comments that we totally missed last time. So we have 2 episodes to catch up on. So I wanted to say thank you, Michelle, for listening. Thank you, Christy, for your support. Ashley agrees with Leilani that Senhwa from ATEEZ probably does smell like fairies in Twilight. And if you're if you're not sure what that's about, listen to episode 4. And Morgan is with me on Team Jopping. And if you're not sure what she's talking about, listen to episode 3.
I still stand firm in my convictions on Jopping, but
that's okay.
Morgan has the right to her opinion.
All right. So, Lon, you want to introduce our topic?
I do, but Cassie came up with this episode title. So we're talking in summary about our connection with the groups. So our emotional and intellectual, however you want to call it, also known as Delulu.
Yeah, so I want to make a disclaimer to all the Lino fans. We are not actually talking about Lino today. The title is a play on words, which I will explain in a minute. But we are talking about parasocial relationships. We are going to do both a nerdy deep dive into the social science of this topic with a lot of our own personal fun and whimsy stories sprinkled in. And
this was something that we're very excited to talk about, but there was also some apprehension about the social science part of it and if that would connect with our wonderful listeners. So we're hoping that we balance this episode out well with some sciencey stuff that we researched, as well as what Cassie just said, some fun, really, really silly, in some cases, stories about our own experiences with parasocial relationships.
Yeah, we are always open to feedback, so definitely let us know what you think. So, the reason for the title. When I was about 11 and 12, I used to sneak into my older sister's bedroom and take her teenage magazines. This was a very big deal to me, so I remember some of them very well. I was in 6th grade when the movie Titanic came out, and I fell super hard in love with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I was definitely not the only one. And in one of these magazines that I read, they had one of those advice columns where people would write in, and the quote-unquote expert, they would write in questions, and the quote-unquote expert would answer them. And, they almost made each question like a mini article, so there would be a title. And this one was titled, "Am I Too Loopy for Leo?" And it had this drawing of this girl laying on her bed. She had pigtails, and she was holding a framed photo of Leonardo DiCaprio, and there were hearts everywhere. And the question was basically, I love Leonardo DiCaprio so much, and I'm wondering if it's too much. And the answer was along the lines of, as long as you're not skipping school to go see Titanic again and again, spending money you don't have on posters and movie tickets, and canceling plans with your family and friends, it's okay. Enjoy. And obviously, that article has stuck with me because all these years later, I'm describing it in great detail. When I was a kid, my celebrity crushes were a big part of my life. And getting into K-pop as an adult a few years later was a confusing part of the journey for me in the beginning, but I have learned to embrace it and have had a lot of joy from it. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And really, the big takeaway from what we're going to be talking about today, based on our own personal experiences and the research we've done, is that the term parasocial relationship, which Leilani will define in a moment, often gets talked about in a very negative light. People often hear the term for the first time when they're reading an article about the downside and the idea that it could be dangerous. But that is not what the research shows. Parasocial relationships are not inherently bad. It actually can be a very healthy, just fun part of life that brings joy to a lot of people. And I would like to say, in my personal opinion, even some Delulu can just be a really fun part of life, as long as you know what is real and what is not real. And my favorite example is if you are watching a live with Jungkook from BTS that, goes on for hours and hours, a lot of people will just sort of play it quietly at their desk at work. And you tell people, oh, I'm FaceTiming with my boyfriend. That's just hilarious. Okay. That's just a classic army joke. As long as you really do know that it is a joke and you are one of literally millions of people watching and saying the same thing. And I want to disclaim that I'm using the term Delulu in a fun and whimsical way. I'm not talking about actual pathological, diagnosable delusions. If anybody else has adopted a different term for this, I'm definitely open to hearing that and changing my vocabulary. So Leilani will tell us in more detail what a parasocial relationship actually is.
Indeed. So, what is a parasocial relationship? Where did it come from? Where did that term come from? And then a little bit about the benefits and risks of it. So, we'll put all of our sources in the show notes. This one came from Wikipedia. The definition is involving or relating to a connection that someone feels between themselves and a famous person they do not know, a character in a book, film, TV series, or AI. So breaking that down a little bit, that's just what Cassie described, even though we're not really talking to Jungkook while he's folding his underwear or whatever it is he's doing. We do feel a connection with them. And a little bit to what Cassie said earlier, life is hard. Like, life is so hard for all of us. We all have things going on that people may not even know about. We all have struggles. And so I've definitely, in this chapter of my life, adopted if it's not hurting myself or it's not hurting anybody else, then just do it. As long as you're not taking it too far and it gives you like 5 minutes of reprieve from the kids and the job and the relationships you may be struggling with, or trauma, or whatever it is that you're dealing with, then, have at it. So back to the history here. Parasocial interaction was first described from the perspective of media and communication studies. In 1956, Horton and Wall explored the different interactions between mass media users and media figures and determined the existence of a parasocial relationship, where the user acts though they are involved in a typical social relationship. However, parasocial interaction existed before mass media when a person would establish a bond with political figures, gods, even spirits. So that's to say that this idea of connecting with a figure, whether they're real or imagined, is has been going on since the humans have been around. This isn't something new or specific to K-pop. I think, my personal opinion, it's just more visible because of social media and the shift in this generation and our generation being more open and vulnerable about what brings us joy. I think people just didn't have the safety to talk about that kind of stuff before. So since then, the term has been adopted by psychologists in furthering their studies of the social relationships that emerge between consumers of mass media and the figures they see represented there. Horton Wall suggested that for most people, parasocial interactions with persona complement their current social interactions, while also suggesting that there are some individuals who exhibit extreme parasociality, or they substitute parasocial interactions for actual social interactions. Percy and Rubin from 1989 contested this view, finding that parasocial interactions occurred as a natural byproduct of time spent with media figures. And so this is just summing up the idea that it's just like anything in life. In moderation, this is all fine. If you take some time to go to a concert, or you watch somebody's social media content, you spend some time watching their videos, like Cassie was saying at the top of the episode, as long as you're not going through and going into debt or not doing real life because you're just doing this other thing, whether it be K-pop or whatever it is that you're hyper interested in, then I think it's all fine. In and of itself, it's not a bad thing. It just becomes an issue if you let it consume your life, and or if you allow these relationships to take the place of actual humans in your life. So I think the moral of the story of this whole series that we're doing here is just try to have some balance. And one of the things that I found really interesting was this has become such a thing that parasocial was Cambridge Dictionary's word of the year in 2025, wow, which I thought was just shows like how massive this concept has become.
Yes. So with parasocial becoming so much more widely known, it is getting confused with other very similar concepts. So I'm going to go through a few related words that tend to get used incorrectly, or parasocial tends to get substituted for these other similar things. Now, I do want to say that in the research I did, a lot of there definitely is variation on how people are talking about these things. So if you were to read one article, it might describe things a little bit differently than what we're saying here, because different researchers, journalists are interpreting some things differently. But I am primarily referring to the definitions provided by a Dr. Gail Stever. So a few related vocab words are fan, and a fan admires a celebrity's work or talent, as opposed to feeling like a more like connection with that person. A parasocial interaction is where, you might have an interaction in the moment. Example that I heard was if you're at a sporting event and you say whatever people say at sporting events, go hit the ball. That's a I don't know. I don't go to a lot of sports things. That's a parasocial interaction. It's a relationship, a parasocial relationship. If you leave that event and tell your friends oh, that baseball player is married to blah, 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 and they grew up blah, blah, blah. You have that deeper knowledge. So an example with K-pop might be that the interaction is if you're at a concert and you're screaming because you love the song. That's a parasocial interaction. A parasocial attachment, which I was excited to hear because this is what I personally resonate the most with, is the emotional comfort that you get from a celebrity or their work. And the example that Dr. Stever gave is she did a lot of studies of Josh Groban fans, and she gave an example of a woman she interviewed who was going through cancer treatment. And she said, I never go to my chemotherapy treatments without my Josh Groban playlist CD. I think she did this a long time ago. So she probably had her Walkman with her specific Josh Groban CD. and this is an example of where we want to be careful how we talk about this when, you hear the word parasocial and people immediately think it's something bad. I can't imagine anybody finding negativity in this. This is defined as a parasocial attachment. And I think we can all agree that that's a very positive thing if this woman is getting comfort during a really difficult experience. Now, where it can start to become problematic is when you get into celebrity worship, which is when the admiration shifts into obsessive fascination and preoccupation, which can also be described as an addiction. And there are different levels of severity, with borderline pathological being the most severe. And we're not going to talk a lot about this, but we're going to touch on it a little bit more at the end. But now we're going to talk more about what the benefits are of our parasocial relationships.
Some of the benefits, we really feel like they're a part of our lives and friend group. We genuinely love them and want them to succeed and be happy. Both, and we want them to, I think a healthy interaction or relationship, I think, would be, we love BTS. Cassie and I both love them. If they were to, and hopefully they do what makes them happy, but if what makes them happy is getting married and having children, and we would be happy for them. We would be genuinely excited. And I personally would feel so much love and gratitude for the person that chose to love our boys. We love them so much. So thank you for loving them so much and being there with them. That's how I genuinely feel. So it's similar to what I would feel for my friends. If my friends got into a really good relationship or, did something fun with a new passion, I would be excited for them. And it's a similar feeling. I just genuinely, they have done and provided so much to us. And to me personally, I want them to be just as happy as they make us. And I think that that's the definition of a connection, that we love them and we want the best for them. I think another wonderful call out is it can lead to real life relationships and friendships. This fandom, it has brought me, Army has been such a great community for me over the years. And I've really only considered myself Army maybe 3.5 years now. And during that short time, I've met really, really wonderful people and had some great experiences. And it actually led to, Cassie and ours friendship that has been going, despite our couples counseling, has been going strong for 3 years. We still have work to do. No relationship is perfect. But it did. It provided an opportunity for people to meet in spaces where they probably normally would not have met. Like, not to get too personal, but Cassie and I live like 2.5 hours from each other. We would have probably never run into each other. And now she is like one of my closest friends. Like, I talk to her incessantly throughout the week. So that's just one example of it. And another funny story is I don't have K-pop boyfriends. I have biases, and then I have husbands, which we'll talk a little bit more later. But Cassie more so, because she's very, I think, intentional about who she wants to marry in the future from BTS. And so she wanted to marry Jin, which, as we've discussed in other episodes, he is my bias, my alt bias of all K-pop. And that was a difficult point in our relationship, because how dare she want to marry my bias? But after some reconsideration, she very, very graciously decided to give up Jin and has agreed to marry Namjoon. So that just shows you what an amazing friend she is, and how great the fandom and the parasocial relationships can be. Because I would say I'm about 30% serious about what I'm saying. I would say that I'm about 30% serious that would be a possibility for me. And so I think that Cassie feels the same way. Well, I don't know what her percentage is in her head, but I think that we're like 70% kidding most of the time, with this little thing in the back of our head that if the opportunity were to present itself ever in real life, we would definitely jump on it.
Yes, true story. Before I met Leilani, I spent a lot of time very carefully deciding who would be the best life partner for me from BTS, which had nothing to do with bias and everything to do with compatibility. And I did, in fact, choose Jin. And I very graciously decided that I would sacrifice that for Leilani. And, it was quite a journey, but these days I'm really excited to marry Kim Namjoon. So it all worked out in the end. I will, because I'm such a good friend, I will marry Kim Namjoon.
Yeah. Yes, you are. The sacrifice will never go unappreciated in my heart. Just know that.
Thank you. Thank you. So another benefit of parasocial relationships, connections, attachment is feelings of empathy towards, I don't really like this term, but what the research calls the out groups. And this is a way for people to be exposed, find connections with people that they might not meet in their real life, or maybe people that, they might meet in their real life but not have close relationships with for whatever reason. One of the areas that researchers have looked at the most is with media, particularly TV shows, with characters represented from the LGBTQIA plus community. And I see a lot of examples with two. One is with young people in the queer community who haven't really found people that they can relate to in real life. The people that they see through their media, whether it's characters in a story or celebrities who are out, it can give a lot of comfort finding that connection. Or people who are maybe a bit closed-minded, and then they've actually done research studies that after watching certain TV shows with characters who are queer, they develop an empathy and understanding. Empathy is the wrong word. They develop an understanding and a connection that they didn't have before, and then they're tested on their level of homophobia, for lack of better words, and they scored lower than they had going into it before watching this TV show. And this is one of the reasons why I love K-pop so much, is it does give people an opportunity to learn about a culture and a country and be exposed to a language that they might not have exposure to in real life. I talked about this in episode 3 about our alt groups. When I first found BTS, I thought I was too old for them, so I didn't become a fan initially, but my kids loved them, and I loved that because they were getting this exposure to a culture that they didn't have exposure to in our real lives. And that is so, so important to me. I think that that is so important to our world, honestly. I'm going to give one more example. I heard that one of the main reasons for the modern day Olympics is less about sports and more about connection, like inter-country connection. And I heard a quote from a gymnastics podcast that I listened to. Shout out to Jessica Burns, or Jessica O'Brien, maybe, from Gymcastic. She said this thing that stuck with me. The Olympics is supposed to make you say, I don't want to bomb that country. My friend from the Olympics lives there. And I feel that way about K-pop. It gives international fans to form these connections to people in countries that otherwise they might hear, on the news, something's going on in this country and have no personal connection. And hopefully it's not that someone then doesn't care, but when you don't have that personal connection and you do have a very busy life, it's just not, on your radar as strong. And so I just think that this is such a valuable way to make those connections.
If I can interject, that
Yes.
reminds me of our mutual, somebody else we have a parasocial relationship with. Our mutual hero, Brene Brown, has a quote that is similar. I'm paraphrasing. People are hard to hate up close. Lean in. Yeah. When you get to know somebody, another culture, another group that's not like yours, because we hear these stereotypes that, oh, they're this, they're that, or whatever. And when you get to know somebody, even through television, art, which is why art is so important. Cassie and I could just go on and on and on. But why art is so important, period, because it gives us an easier runway to connect with other groups.
Yes, for sure. So important, so powerful. Another benefit is the parasocial attachment, the comfort and joy that we get from these connections can really just help us in life. Like Leilani said, life is hard. You got to find your joy, your comfort where you can. And for me, personally, getting into K-pop has been such a huge game changer for my mental health. I've struggled with anxiety and depression my entire life. So it's been a lifelong quest figuring out how to manage that, how to care for myself. And I do now with K-pop what I used to try to do with meditation. I used to spend so long meditating with the goal of feeling happy and feeling calm and feeling joyful. And, and I had some success, but I had to work really hard for it. Now, I'm not trying to say anything bad about meditation. There's a lot of studies showing the power of meditation. But what I have found through my own lived experiences, that if I watch a K-pop music video, I very quickly, very easily, without all the emotional effort, get that result that I was chasing through meditation. And so a specific example I want to use about the parasocial attachment. I have a routine when I am really struggling with stress or anxiety. So an example is if we're just having a rough family day at home, more often than I'd like to admit, we have one of those days where everybody, for whatever reason, is stressed, upset, and everybody is kind of triggering everybody else. And, I want to be there to like help my children calm down, regulate their nervous systems, but I can't because my nervous system is so dysregulated. The best thing I can do is take a break, walk away. And whenever I have the opportunity, I go upstairs, I get my weighted blanket, I lay under my weighted blanket, I curl into the fetal position around my stuffed BT21 RJ doll, and I watch a very specific performance of BTS's Magic Shop. I don't know what the concert is called, but they're in the sparkly suits and they're performing Magic Shop. And the whole routine takes about 5 minutes, and it just calms me down and resets me enough to then go back downstairs and be there for my children. It doesn't make everything better, but it takes the edge off enough that then I can go be the mom that I want to be and help them.
That's
and
beautiful.
That's an example of parasocial attachment and using BTS in a really healthy way that adds a lot of value to my life. Now, the next benefit, I don't really have a good label for it, but again, back to my memories of middle school is when I first heard this, and then it came up again this last week when I was doing the research. A lot of people, I was then middle school story. I was watching a TV show where they were talking about kids having like celebrity crushes, and somebody described them as practice crushes. And I thought, well, I don't really need to practice having a crush, but that's obviously stuck with me. And over the years, I've thought of early celebrity crushes as safe crushes, because despite what we just said about our K-pop husbands, we do know mostly that we don't.
70%.
70%. We 70% know that we don't actually have the opportunity to put ourselves out there with this person in a way that would lead to rejection. We're not actually going to ask this person out on a date. Even though, at this time when I watched this, I think it was a little bit before the Leo thing, when I really, truly, truly believed like 95% that I might marry Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Like I truly thought that. But reflecting now, the world is bigger than I thought it was at the time. So, and then that came up a lot over this last week when I was doing the research. Practice crushes for kids and teens. Practice crushes. Now, I have not heard anybody else talk about this, but based on my own experience and hearing in the non-research sense, just, chatting with other fans, I think there's a flip side to that coin where people who have been in long-term relationships, like myself, I have been with my husband for 20 years. Celebrity crushes then give us the opportunity to have that feeling again, sort of like meeting someone new, feeling butterflies, feeling the excitement in a situation where it's appropriate. You're not at risk of cheating.
Yeah.
Because again, there's like a, 50% chance that you will never have the opportunity to act on this. I just adjusted the percent, so, and I don't know, I have heard that not every spouse or life partner is as supportive of mine, but I know that some are. And I personally am very lucky. My husband is super supportive of the love for my boys. He gives me photo cards and buys me merch with their faces on it. And he's comfortable doing this stuff because he does not feel threatened. Because even more so than me, he knows I don't actually have a chance to get with these guys.
You have a 70% chance. Or
I have a
30% chance. I just flipped the math in my
I think that he believes it's more like 0%. So like he has no problem with like supporting it. And it's just become like a really fun thing for us. He gives me photo cards all the time, and it's actually been really helpful.
So sweet.
I was just thinking about this yesterday. So years and years ago, we took the love languages quiz, and gifts came up as my love language. And like, what can you give someone that's really cheap so you can do it frequently? Chocolate. So he's like started giving me like candy and cookies. And at first it was so nice. Oh, I feel so loved. This is so fun. And then I realized it was really interfering with my efforts to eat more healthy. So I asked him, please stop giving me this stuff. I'm trying to eat less sugar. So then the gifts stopped. And then I'm starting to feel really neglected and unloved. And I said, why'd you stop giving me gifts? You know I need the gifts. And he says, you told me to stop. Well, ignore that. Give me gifts. So then the cookies and the chocolate come back. And then I'm like struggling with trying to eat healthy. And I tell him to stop. And we went through this cycle for years. And now we don't have to worry about that. I handle my own chocolate distribution. And he gives me photo cards.
Beautiful system. He
beautiful
can send
system.
Me the chocolate cookies.
Okay.
Just so you know.
I'll have him send it to you.
Any surplus can come my way. I will happily accept them in a platonic gift way.
So that's just an example of how I believe, and I would love to hear, you know, other people's thoughts on this. Celebrity crushes can be safe crushes. If you're on the younger side, a way to explore those feelings for the first time. If you're on the older side or in a committed relationship, an opportunity to still have those feelings that make life fun and exciting without putting your real life relationship in jeopardy.
And I would argue, I am not seeing anybody. So I'm a widow. I know I haven't talked about that on the show, but my husband passed away almost 3 years ago now. And so I am definitely not ready for a relationship. And it's a fun way for me to you can't do that with an actual human. You shouldn't do that, I should say. You can't be like, I will pay attention to you only when I feel like it. And then the capacity that I have, and when I feel like it, and when I don't want to deal with you, I'm going to put you back. You can't do that with a real human.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been super fun to just be like, these are my husbands. They're great. And then when I don't feel like dealing with them, I just don't watch their content. I put them away. They're in another country. They don't know I exist. Like they don't, like I just, it's really freeing to have, like you said, that sense of like excitement and, getting to know the little things about them, but there's none of the emotional complications that come with a real relationship. So I think for maybe people that are like, too, like it is a fun way to experience that. And I would say, I know we're like splitting hairs here. I'm not truly romantically attached to them. Yes, are they all attractive? Absolutely. They are all very attractive. Absolutely. 1,000%. But because they are people we don't know, that emotional intimacy to be like really attracted to them isn't there. At least for me, that's how it works for me. Mm-hmm. So I think it does provide it's just fun. It's just so fun. Like you see pictures and they're in a suit or they're in a like my alt bias gin, I was flipping out in my, we'll talk about those fun stories later, but one of my other friends that her alt bias is gin too, when he did I think it was Marie Claire shoot where he had the open back jacket thing that he was wearing. He had a necklace going down and his back was exposed. You would have thought he was like the centerfold in Playboy or something. I was like, I cannot believe I'm seeing his bare back. Like it was just fun, right? But then I move on with my day. Like I go do whatever. So yeah, it is fun. You guys can't see us, but Cassie and I are just smiling so much right now. Just thinking about, like, it just brings so much pure, unadulterated joy.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really great. I love that. And then the other thing I want to say is that something I love about it is those butterflies get to last forever because you never leave the infatuation phase because you never meet them as real people, right? Because in a real relationship, right, what can happen is you meet someone and you're so infatuated and it's butterflies and rainbows all the time. And then you actually do life together and real life kind of gets in the way of all that. And just things become stressful and tense and you get into patterns. And sometimes, relationships don't last because you've left that phase. But with our parasocial relationships, it's rainbows, butterflies, and lachimolalas forever. And my favorite example of this is the Bon Voyage, BTS. They're in Hawaii. Jungkook and Taehyung are doing the dishes. And Taehyung leaves to go wash his face. I think this is so freaking hilarious. I love this so much because I just get to watch it and laugh about it. If my husband and I, like if my husband of 20 years and I are doing dishes and he just walks away to go wash his face and leaves me to finish cleaning the kitchen by myself, in that moment, it doesn't matter how hot he is. I am so angry. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So the parasocial is the relationship where it just gets to be fun and joy all the time, no matter what like annoying things they do, because we just get to take it in as entertainment and our lives are not negatively affected by it. And obviously right now we're not talking about like huge problematic things. We're not getting into that right now. We're talking about the little silly thing.
So that wraps it up. We have so much passion for this topic that we made the decision to split this into 2 parts. So this is part 1 and part 2. Do you want to give them a little preview of what we're going to talk about?
A lot of it will be a continuation, more fun stories. We are going to get into a little bit more of when things can become problematic. So both a little bit more, we'll touch on some of that vocab I talked about in the beginning of celebrity worship syndrome, as well as issues kind of relating more like specifically to K-pop with the no dating rules and, the problems that can come with that for the idols. Am I covering it?
Yeah, but lots of fun stuff too.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff. Both and we're going to talk about a little bit more on how parasocial relationships are part of like the K-pop business model specifically, and how so much of the idol's side of the relationship is by design and how we feel about that, and lots more fun stories.
So please tune into the second part on our discussion of Sarah lotion.
Now you're just making up words.
I am. I'm talented. Parasocial relationships.
All right. See you next time.
See ya.
Bye.